Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership on this committee. For decades, elements in our government have engaged in an extensive cover-up to subvert the will of Congress and to keep the American public in the dark relating to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. No matter how ugly it is or how inconvenient it is to elites, organized crime, or deep state bureaucrats, the American people deserve the truth, and they can handle the truth. While the American public still may be in the dark, poll after poll make clear the cover-up has failed. Approximately 2/3 of Americans still don't buy the official narrative from our government that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Cover-ups and a failure to be transparent has rightfully bred distrust. So much distrust, nearly 40% of Americans believe the United States government was involved in the assassination of JFK. Let that sink in. Nearly 40%. This task force, working alongside President Trump, is working to use sunshine as a disinfectant and give the American people the pure, unvarnished truth they deserve. Mr. Hardway, thank you for being here to all of our witnesses today. You worked for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which investigated the assassination of JFK. You had firsthand interactions with the CIA as you worked to get the truth. Based on what you witnessed, do you believe the CIA engaged in a concerted effort to cover up certain facts related to the assassination of President Kennedy?
Yes.
Do you believe the efforts to obstruct congressional investigations into the assassination of President Kennedy by the CIA you've described violated federal law?
People more expert in federal criminal law than I am have expressed that opinion to me and have expressed that opinion under oath.
Based on what you know, what relationship, if any, did the CIA have with Lee Harvey Oswald prior to the assassination of President Kennedy?
Based upon the circumstantial evidence of record, and it is overwhelming, they had they used him as either a witting or an unwitting agent of influence.
Seems that way, doesn't it? Do you believe there was evidence to suggest the CIA was using Lee Harvey Oswald in active intelligence operations shortly before the assassination of President Kennedy?
Yes.
Dr. Curtis.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You were one of the physicians who treated President Kennedy at Parkland Memorial Hospital after he was shot. You were better situated than almost anyone to see President Kennedy's physical condition when he arrived at the hospital. And yet you've said, I can't reconcile my knowledge of what I saw with the findings of the government, is what you said at the time.
Yes.
In your medical opinion, what do you attribute as the cause of President Kennedy's wounds?
The cause of his death? Mm-hmm. The 2 bullets were fired from the front, caused his death. And either one of them would have. The blue and the green
Yes, sir.
bullets.
How did what the government said happened to John F. Kennedy Jr., John F. JFK? How did your medical findings of his death, how were they different?
The government wanted the president to have died from the window, from the bullets fall from the window, because that would have caused the Harvey Oswald to have done it. And they went to great lengths to make those 2 bullets do the job. And those 2 bullets did not do the job. One went in the president's back, and the other went into Governor Conley. So those 2 bullets didn't do anything to kill President Kennedy.
Okay, my last question, Dr. Curtis, you ready? Are the wounds you observed consistent with the government's conclusion Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone?
No.
Thank you, sir. We thank all of our witnesses who are here today.
You were a dental surgeon. Why did they bring you into the operation room?
That's one thing Arlen Specter asked me, what is a dentist doing operating on the president? Then I had to qualify myself. The training that I have would encompass those particular procedures. And that's a simple procedure, and I did it well, and I just knew how to do it. There was nobody else there to do it, and I did it because Dr. Carrico asked me to do it.
Can you tell us about the wounds that you observed on the president and how they differ from what came out in some of the reporting?
The wounds on the president were to his throat and to his head and to his back. The wound to his throat would have killed him. The wound to his head definitely would have killed him. The wound to his back would not have killed him.
Did the wounds to his throat and his head look like completely separate wounds?
They were two separate wounds. The one, well, let me show it to you. The blue wound was sent from the railroad trestle all the way over to kill him right here, and that went to his throat. And the way that killed him is that it obstructed the trachea, and he couldn't breathe. So he would have been dead before he reached the hospital just simply because of that wound. The other wound that he had to his head would have killed him instantly because it removed about a third of his brain.
Thank you. Mr. Hardway, I want to move to you next. You talked about the obstruction of a federal investigation that you yourself witnessed. You were on the House Select Committee for Assassination, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What year would that have been?
1977, 1978. The obstruction occurred entirely in 1978.
What was your role in that investigation?
My role was a researcher with primary responsibility for researching Lee Harvey Oswald's activities in Mexico City and the CIA response to that.
We've heard about some of the administrative roadblocks that the CIA put up for you. Did you have any direct verbal communication with anybody at the CIA?
Oh, yeah, frequently.
Can you tell us about some of those conversations and how it might have been conceived as obstruction?
Well, when we first started, we had unlimited, unexpurgated access. We had 2 clerks assigned to us. We had our office at the CIA. Pretty much went to work out there every morning. We'd ask for a file. They would go get it. We would review it. It was unredacted and given to us in its original state. After they brought George Joannides in, he began slowly tightening down the process. We were no longer working with 2 clerks who went and got us our files. We had to file formally requests through him to get the files, and we started experiencing significant delays in the files that we would get. We started noticing that the files we would get would have obvious things missing from them. Then he went so far as to actually start putting parts of the files in envelopes and leaving them in the files, so that what we would get is we would sign that we'd seen the files, but we weren't allowed to open the stuff that he had placed in envelopes. That came back to haunt us later in dealing with the final report and some of the things we were trying to get out of them, when they would tell the chairman of the committee, he's seen that, here's where he signed for the file. And I would have to explain to Chairman Stokes that, no, that was not in the file when I saw it, because that was what I was looking for, and it was not there. It must have been in one of the envelopes.
There is so much medical evidence that is tainted or missing or destroyed
But why did that happen?
or altered that there's no reason to have confidence in the autopsy report. Those things, I'm going to get there, sir.
Okay.
Those things would not have happened if a lone nut had killed the president. If a lone nut killed the president, there's no reason to do all those things, to destroy x-rays, to possibly alter autopsy photos, although that's not yet been determined. It's a question that remains outstanding, to alter the existing skull x-rays. So you don't do those things, and you don't change the autopsy conclusions 4 different times within 2 weeks after the president's death if a lone nut killed the president. So it's clear to me that the government, these are my conclusions after years of study, it's clear to me that the government was trying to manage what story it could sell to the American people.
More than 62 years after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, we have now seen thousands of files released on the president's death. But tonight, some of those files are still unreleased. And that and more were at the center of a congressional hearing this week, casting doubt on the federal government's findings back in the 60s. Living witnesses to that dark day in American history, testifying that Lee Harvey Oswald could not have acted alone, and that it's unlikely a single bullet caused President Kennedy's death. The testimony included allegations of tainted medical files, fake x-rays, lost bullet fragments, even parts of the president's brain gone missing. This hearing, the second on the JFK assassination from the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets.
Direct first-hand evidence of the wounds to the president's body. And that doctor, Dr. Don Curtis, who was one of the physicians at the Parkway Hospital, he basically, Parkland Hospital, he testified that he saw wounds that definitely came from the front of the president, i.e. not from the Texas Book Depository where Lee Harvey Oswald was allegedly located. And this is one of two physicians at Parkland Hospital who've testified to this in the past. It was quite extraordinary to hear his evidence. But frankly, Natasha, you won't see that evidence reported anywhere else except for News Nation. It's been largely ignored by much of the mainstream media, and I find that bewildering.
Yeah,
because
why? Why do you think that is?
The implications are enormous.
Yeah, tell me why.
I think there's a resistance. I don't think there's somebody pulling the strings behind the scenes. I just think that the media is locked into a cycle of denial, that it's such an incomprehensible thing to contemplate the possibility that a president was killed in a coup d'etat in 1963, and that's what we're talking about. More importantly, as you referred, there's still obstruction from the CIA to the release of certain files. And when the House Committee on Assassinations in the 1970s was investigating the assassination, and it did find there was a conspiracy, one of the people who was involved in supposedly helping that inquiry was a guy called George Joannides, and he was a covert liaison officer with the CIA. And it's been discovered by people who were working on that committee at the time, and this was the evidence of a guy called Dan Hardway, who was a former HSCA, House Select Committee for Assassinations investigator. He says that Joannides was basically obstructing their attempt to get access to files, particularly the evidence that the CIA had on Oswald's alleged involvement in a meeting with the Russians in the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. So you have to ask, if there's nothing to hide, why is the CIA still allegedly obstructing ongoing attempts to get to the truth of the JFK case?
Yeah, still questions.